legends are gone, and the weirdness is creeping back into our lands. The bleeding heart of the plague has started beating once more.
Tainted Grail, the fall of Avalon. What is this? A game with a name like that's gotta be good, right? So, what is it exactly? And if you've noticed a similar title on Steam, there is also a deck building game out there. And along with Fall of Avalon and the other one, Conquest, I think it was called, they are based on a board game which is set in a bleak world drenched in dark Arthurian legendary and lore. But let's focus on Fall of Avalon here because it is the green purpose of this video, and it is a first-person RPG developed by Questline. And if you're okay with some Skyrim-esque type of mechanics placed into this dismal, dreamy setting, but none of Skyrim's floaty, wonky combat, but actually more akin to something like Chivalry or Mordhau, but simplified yet 100 times more snappy and responsive than Skyrim, with actual mechanics such as block, parry, cut, thrust, slash, dodge, and so forth, then this one might be right up your piss-drenched alley. So listen up.
Can eat a dick.
Of course, Skyrim's comparisons are thrown around like napkins in a Serbian disco these days, but you gotta admit there are a lot of games out there that warrant that. However, I think in Tainted Grail's situation, it kind of fits naturally, as there's something in Oblivion and Skyrim's aloof waxiness that kind of fits the whole frame of a corrupt, doomed world slowly edging towards the abyss. Even the game's introduction to your character is in the vein of good old Oblivion, you starting your journey from between four thesis-stained walls, miraculously saved by a mysterious character, but this time, lo and behold, you're chosen for some reason. It's not a coincidence, so grab that shit bucket with you just in case and join those bunch of other strangers in the most audacious task ever, stealing Excalibur and killing King Arthur. And during your escape from the island asylum, which is this nut house that you're incarcerated in, you will have a weird trip, actual pun intended here, and become acquainted with a fort dweller, which is a ancient legendary entity that burdens you with yet another destiny on your shoulders. But as far as I could see, regrettably, none of that is really expanded upon during the early access stage of the game, and eventually get spat out into Arthurian Limgrave, where you quickly get to know the lay of the land, explore dank caves, and collect everything that ain't nailed down for no reason whatsoever, pumping endurance so that you can carry more, so that you could loot more. That's how Skyrim's played after all, right? And the strip of land available to us in the early access is referred to as the South, or the Horns of the South, with its central hub, a crumbling, desolate castle, with a lone drunken sentry at its rusted gates. And this is where you will slowly begin to realize how rotten everything is, how everything and everyone is gripped by melancholy, how every NPC has succumbed, whether willingly or not, to a certain dread, like there's this noose around everyone's neck all the time. Of course, there's this thing called the Wyrdness, an evil ancient fog that's creeping inland and has gotten everyone spooked up, and with it come whispers of long-buried secrets and despicable acts. And regrettably, you don't get to delve much into those during the quest lines available during the early access, just some hints at how corrupt and low the once mighty knights of the Round Table have fallen, or have always been. But you're actually giving a choice early on, which might alter the story for you, which I kinda liked, and I would love to explore that further on. But for me, the biggest selling point of the game is actually the visual art style, and although the graphics are nothing that spectacular for the age we live in, however, everything is infused with this dark fantasy autumnal twilight. You've got ruins dotting the horizon over which a pale sun slowly sets, menhirs, ancient ritual sites, the usual druidic cromlech, undead-infested crypts, beaches swarming with drowners, and so on. And your average NPC will vary between something reminding me of the clammy fishfolk from Innsmouth to normal human beings caught up in a world of shit, to the savage Picts and Dauriata, whose every line is adorned with profanities in a delightful Scottish accent.
One thing led to another, and I woke up with my pants down, surrounded by gobshites in the red. I was fighting with my bare ass hanging out, and I still managed to kill a dozen of them. Useless knobs.
And adding to that some of the really goofy quests you get, with the outcome being one big bazinga on your behalf, it kind of gives off a certain Blackadder vibe in comparison to the overall gloominess and despondency. Like, you'd almost expect Brian Blessed to do a cameo and slit some throats with his trusty fruit knife.
I made it! Thanks to my trusty fruit knife!
But then you get pulled back to the grim reality, and you've got your keepers, the normal guys in the castle, whose disposition towards the whole affair is how they're being ground down to dust by the ongoing conflict, and how they refer to as Camelot being this constricting fist of misplaced justice. So some of the quests are half finished, some you take but can't really embark upon since they probably take place in the north, which is unavailable right now, or some are kind of broken, as in you turn them in and then once you've progressed some, and they are completely irrelevant story-wise, or you get stuck in an NPC conversation loop where you turn them in and again, and then you have to exit the conversation. But some are actually interesting, as in they require you to pay attention and figure things out on your own, like read something from a book or from a just random scrap of paper, or listen to a conversation between NPCs and then deduct who's guilty and who's not. And if you report the wrong guy, then he might be innocent and he might get hanged for that and stuff like that. You gotta make decisions. It make for a little bit of roleplay. Again, nothing too fancy, but it's just not all collect this, kill that, and bring it back to me and get your XP and fuck off. But what I felt could use some more work was the sound and audio, and it was kind of absent while doing normal stuff like exploring or just roaming around in town. There would be this like sudden void, like this vacuum of silence, but it's probably something glitching out in the audio. Or at least I did not notice any notable ambience in the background at certain points. But however, once you start finding this Sardaukar dubstep kicks in, which is really cool. Or every once in a while you get this old Vikings intro Wyrdness type of chant, which fits perfectly, obviously. Yet again, I feel the open world could do with some more varied ambience, some sad tunes here and there, some downer chords maybe, nothing too fancy. And speaking of fighting, this is, as I've said, a step up from Skyrim's combat, and I'm only making that comparison since the whole skeleton upon which it seems to be built upon is Skyrimish in a way, as in swing that two-hander and get your two-handed skill leveled up and so forth. But if you play around, you will notice that you actually have, for example, a rush thrust, a dash sideways slash, an actual blocking and parrying which stagger opponents and leave them open for devastating attacks, passive skills that improve these and so forth, as well as your max pain bullet time, something you unlock in your weird trip in the island asylum. And while fighting stupid undead and gnomes and whatever might look a bit stiff because they don't put up much of a fight, the humanoid enemies do make for a stealthy experience. You really need to either get good or gear up in heavy armor in order not to get bashed to a bloody pulp early on. And bandits are fucking everywhere and will respawn and will give you a really hard time in the beginning. Luckily, you collect bounty for each slain bandit, so you can turn that into your profit. And some of the unique enemies, like a named bandit leader, for example, for which you will get a bounty for and be rewarded for killing him, but if you encounter him early on and he starts swinging that big weapon of his your way, you will soon realize that you're screwed and you can't really parry everything, you can't outplay him, you can't, maybe you can outrun, shoot him with arrows or something, but these fights are significantly more difficult and kind of, you know, make you go back after you've pumped some iron, exact revenge and all that. But if you try to fight someone like that, you will notice that you can't really parry his swings. He does damage through your block and all that. So if you're low level, he might even one-shot you. So gear and leveling actually matter. And at least I hadn't noticed any obvious level scaling issues. So in the beginning, you will be giving the choice for a starting boost in some of the skills via a dialogue option. And from then on, you're basically free to level up whatever you want. Attributes are your simple strength, endurance, magic, etc. Nothing too complicated here. And by having enough points into these, you can then learn a passive ability. Every level up gives you one attribute point, while every other level, if I'm not mistaken, gives you a passive point. These are, for example, after a successful parry, your one-handed attacks do 50% more damage, for example, or charging up a heavy attack consumes your mana and therefore does X more damage, and so on. You've got some spells as well, of which, in my opinion, the summoning ones are quite useful. Even if you're not a spellcaster, if you haven't spec'd into magic, you can just summon a random skeleton to completely bamboozle your enemies. So a note here, maybe the AI is not that good, but you know. Weapons and armor can be upgraded, dismantled, crafted, sockets can be added, and then relics inserted into those that give you, for example, an effect like burn enemies when they hit you in melee, or inflict bleed with your weapon, or attack speed increase, so on. And there are also consumables, much like in your Souls games, where you coat your weapon with something and get a certain damage boost for a short duration. And your character can benefit from or suffer from various gear effects, like wearing all heavy armor gives you an extra edge to your two-handed heavy attacks, while at the same time increases your stamina cost for blocking, stamina regeneration is decreased, magic regen is decreased, and so on. And then there's your alchemy and cooking, and you can learn or experiment with recipes. You can just bake the normal products, as in, for example, you get raw meat, just bake it here on that cook fire. It will give you more health regen. You can assign it to a quick slot. You can use it mid-fight, but just so you know, you can get stuffed. So easy on the pies and the red meat. Just if you use too many in a fight, for example, or if you just panic click a lot of consumables, you might get that debuff that slows you down. So have some decency. I mean, there's plague and famine out there. Although there are potions that give you some other effects, so you can, you know, experiment with these. Overall, it's not the most in-depth character customization system. However, it's pretty decent, and it certainly doesn't feel like some placeholder thing, just being there for the sake of, you know, being there. And as of now, the early access build offers around 15 hours of getting to know what to expect of the whole thing, exploring the south, killing bandits, grave robbing, disturbing all ritual sites, getting laughed at by long-dead druids bored out of their minds in the afterlife, and one boss fight that played out a bit saucy, but not anyway near as hard. So the overall thing kind of sets you up for a narrative that I personally might enjoy, and I would love to see what happens with the main story. I did get it on a discount, however, and for the time being, I would suggest you do the same if you're on the fence, since the current build does suffer from some performance issues. There's some micro stuttering every once in a while, and in certain areas my fans would go crazy for no obvious reason. But reading some of the older reviews and some of the comments on Steam, I would say it's an improvement. And I've had zero crashes, zero glitches, nothing game breaking, nothing that's, you know, stopped me from progressing, apart from, you know, the cut quests that are actually, you know, cut because it's an early access. Oh, there's a short demo out on Steam as well that covers the introduction to the story, your escape from the island asylum. This is like an hour maybe of a, you know, playtime experience, which might let you get a hang of the combat, the character progression system, and the overall state and performance, the overall feel of the game. So you can check that one out first if you're interested. So right now I would give it a thumbs up. Hopefully we see a solid release whenever. It's one of those games that don't really have to compete with anything. You already have the lore in the world. It is based on a already established board game. So it's no secret that this won't be a title to break new ground, but I really wish it would take its time, flesh out all the thingies, all the stuff, and explore the vision that the devs had about their game, and release in a playable, enjoyable state. If not, it could at least scratch that itch for a grimdark open world RPG in the vein of Skyrim. It reminds me a lot of Enderal, which is the cool mod for Skyrim as well. So I really hope that we see more updates in the future, that we get to cover more content on that front. Fingers crossed. In the meantime, you know, apart from you hitting that like button or whatever, do share out your thoughts about the game. Have you played it? Have you tried it out? What do you think about it? Also, try to avoid the red priests. Watch out for plague symptoms and watch out for the weirdness, I guess. See you out there. Try to stay safe. This is the Slavic Excalibur. A shovel just floating in the ether. Look at that. Taking it. Could be magical.